Welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's all about you, featuring shows on health and wellness, the performing arts, politics, and people who inspire you to be your best. And now, here's Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Today we have a very, very interesting guest. Her name is Dr.Katie Walsh Flanagan. She's a professor and director of athletic training education in the Department of Health Education at East Carolina, which is in Greenville, North Carolina University. She also has served as its director of sports medicine. She was previously athletic trainer for the Chicago Power professional men's soccer team in Chicago and traveled internationally with the U.S. soccer team. I want to welcome to the Susan Brender Show, Dr. Katie Walsh Flanagan.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Well, Katie, you've been a volunteer athletic trainer at the Pan American and Olympic Games and have worked on the sidelines of the NCAA Division #1 football for the past 30 years. Wow.
Yes, I'm old.
Well, don't worry about being old. You really have quite a background.
Thank you. I've been very lucky. On a side note, there weren't few women when I started this profession, and I'm pleased to see that it's kind of balancing out. But yes, I've had some amazing opportunities, so I am very, very fortunate.
Well, let's talk about those opportunities. Would you tell our audience some of the opportunities that you really have done and the ones that you felt were the most important in your life?
Well, I'm fortunate in the fact that I am an athletic trainer, so I'm licensed and certified to provide health care to physically active people. So even though I just mentioned I was old, at lunchtime today I went and walked our stadium steps. We have 50,000 seats. And so for exercise and doing that. But we're also the people that run out on the field when someone falls, whether it be U.S. Olympic soccer, whether it be football or peewee sports, baseball, softball. So my whole career has been working with active people that want to stay active, and I work under a physician. All walks of life I've been able to work under, and as a professor, I had to come up with a research area. So I was trying to find something back in the day that would impact what I do on a daily basis as opposed to some little micro thing that didn't really make a lot of sense to a lot of people. So traveling all over the world, being with both professional men's and women's teams, being at the universities all across the country, all of these together have afforded me an opportunity to get a message out about lightning safety and about things that everyone in the country can experience and what to do about it. So that's primarily things that make me most happy. I've made a difference in people's lives. I've kept them healthy and active, and I've got a message that I can give to even people that aren't active about what they can do to keep themselves and their loved ones safe.
Tell us about the message you have.
Well, people in general tend to think that if there's a lightning or a thunderstorm, that as long as they're not getting wet, that they're safe. So if you go back under the picnic shelter, if you are on the golf course and you're just waiting under some trees, if you are waiting at anything called a shelter, waiting for the bus, waiting for the train, and it's raining and you're not getting wet, that you're safe. People in garages, people in screened-in porches, all that sort of thing. And that's wrong. When there's lightning or when there's thunder, if you see lightning, if you hear thunder, you need to vacate and go inside a substantial building. Go inside a place where there's 4 walls, there's a roof, and stay inside and don't open the windows, and you'll be much more safe than you were outside.
Do people take that message seriously?
Well, I would hope so. In Florida alone, where your show is based out of, sadly, you guys are in the top 5 of lightning fatalities for the last dozen years or so. And every single one of these fatalities have been, not just in Florida, but across the country, have been people that are outside. Now, some of them are trying to get to safety, so they waited too long. Some are walking the dog. Some are running. Some are just doing yard work and gardening. And so if they would just think about listening for thunder and looking for lightning and knowing as soon as they hear those signs that they really need to stop what they're doing immediately and get someplace safer.
Yeah, well, that's an important message. I really believe that people have to listen very carefully about your message. But let's move on for a moment. You got a graduate degree from, if I'm not mistaken, Illinois State, and a doctorate in education leadership from the University of Southern California. Now, how did that help what you do today?
Well, athletic trainers in general, right now, if you get a bachelor's degree, you can earn the right to sit for the national exam to get board certified as an athletic trainer. We are transitioning into that degree, kind of like physical therapy and physician's assistant. You no longer, in several years, no longer would be able to sit for the certification after a bachelor's degree. You have to do it after a master's. And part of that came about because well over 75% of the people now that practice athletic training have a master's. So it's kind of the thing you do. You get an undergraduate degree in athletic training, you move on and get a master's in athletic training or something equivalent while you're gaining more practice in the field, and then you move on to your profession. The doctorate for me came about as a sort of a twist in my life. I had no intention of teaching. I thought I'd be a horrible teacher. I wanted to just work with healthy, active clients. And it dawned on me that every day I'm explaining when somebody tore an ACL that I would have to explain that's a ligament in the knee, and here's what it does, and here's why it's important. And then it dawned on me that actually what I was doing was teaching. So going back and getting my doctorate at Southern Cal, and part of my doctorate was through medical school, so that was quite fun. It then afforded me the opportunity to become in charge of students that want to then go on and learn how to be an athletic trainer. So I set up their coursework, their clinical work, their practices in the field, and I get to model them under the professional behavior that I expect of my students. So those degrees helped me. Not everyone needs to have a doctorate to do what I do.
Yeah.
Part of having a doctorate also means I have to have a research focus. So that's how Lightning came about. So you don't just normally get a doctorate and that's all you do is teach. You have to do something else as well.
Mm-hmm. So what do athletic trainers do?
Well, I'm glad you asked. The abbreviation we use for them is AT, kind of like PT or MD, but AT is a healthcare provider, and we work under the direction of a physician. So like a PA, they can operate and do all sorts of things, but we have a protocol that a physician has signed off specifically for me or whatever AT you're working in their state. So we provide preventative care. We make diagnoses on athletes. If someone were to fall on the field playing soccer, I can put my hands on them and check and tell you if it's a damaged ligament, tendon, cartilage, muscle, bone, nerve. But most importantly, can they go back? Do they have a concussion or are they just tired? Are they dehydrated or do they maybe have low blood sugar? We know how to do severe things like put in airways of people that aren't breathing. Make sure that if somebody were playing rugby or ice hockey, lacrosse, football, and we thought they had a neck injury, that we know how to package them and put them on the spine board to keep them as healthy as we can without making it worse. So there's a lot of physical therapy in what we do, but at a university, I see my athletes 20 hours a week because they're allowed to practice that much.
Oh, is that
At high schools and middle schools, when they're let out of schools and they run out to their fields to play volleyball or, badminton, what have you, the athletic trainer is the one who decides. Is that a rash or is that very contagious and worrisome MRSA, which is a bad skin thing, or is it measles? So we do have kind of a big variety of our training, and we are, at a lot of high schools, sometimes the only healthcare provider that a particular student might see.
Yeah. You mentioned the word concussion, and I know that that is a very, very, very common thing among athletes. Tell us more about what is happening now with concussions. So, for example, are teams starting to buy helmets that avoid or prevent concussions? And is there any other way to prevent concussions?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because concussions definitely getting a lot of media, and I'm glad, because for the 30 years I've been practicing as an AT, we've always seen them and we've always known about them. The problem is, back in the day, if someone was dizzy or confused or had a headache, they could lie to us and tell us they were not dizzy, they were not confused, they didn't have a headache. And as much as we wanted to believe the other, we had to go on what they told us. Now things have progressed to a point where we actually do have computerized testing that we do. And what that does is it tests reaction rate, it tests your eye movement, it tests things that you can't fake. So everybody does a baseline. Cheerleaders, cross-country runners, everybody. And that's your normal, how you normally react to touching a screen every time it says B as in boy or what have you, matching patterns. So it's not as our students think, it's some sort of a computer test for brilliance. It's not. So then if they do get injured and they tell us they're not dizzy, they're not nauseous, they're not headache, we have a lot of other skills now. Balance we have, which is hard to fake if you're trying to be perfect balance. We have them redo the computer testing. Things like putting foam on people's heads and putting a big rubber ball around them, to prevent a concussion have not statistically shown that they actually work. Because if I took an egg and I rolled it in foam, but I shook it as hard as I could, that little yolk in there, which is my brain, is still rattling around inside my skull. So it's not necessarily being hit. Sometimes it's just, you fall and you land, but it's the egg yolk, your brain, schlossing around inside your skull. And there's no way to prevent that. So what is good now is we can diagnose it better. And we no longer say, oh, you just got your bell rung, or oh, you're just dizzy. We take it very, very, very seriously, thankfully.
Do schools take it as seriously as you do?
If they have an athletic trainer, they do. And the amazing, fabulous thing that they're doing recently in the last 3 or 4 years, if I had an athlete with a concussion, I can prevent, and I'll say him, I can prevent him from playing football for as long as I deem necessary and my physician deems necessary to put him back in. But he's still going to class. He's still looking at his notes, looking up at the teacher, looking at his notes, looking up at the blackboard, which can make a concussion worse. In the last couple of years, at secondary schools and also now at colleges, they're having a return to learn, where there's accommodation made for people with concussions that maybe they can just sit and listen to a lecture and not write, those sort of things. So I do think schools, not only medical side, but teacher side, are starting to learn this is bigger than it was. It's not somebody faking because they don't want to take a test. So it is coming around, and I'm really excited about the direction it's going.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's just turn again to this issue of lighting safety, because you do a great deal of work in this direction.
Funny, because it starts back when I was a child in California, where there's lots of earthquakes. You're always taught as a child in California that when you enter a room to immediately think of where is another exit besides the one you came in. That's simply because if there's an earthquake, that exit might not be viable to you. And so I think all of us have in our own heads these little emergency action plans that we never called them that. So an emergency action plan is for anything, but it's just, okay, what do I do if this happens? So with lightning, what we want people to do is to think about, where are safe places at my house? If I'm having a big family reunion out at this big campground and there were lightning, where now, where before it happens would be a safe place where my family can go? When do we need to get to that place? So if we don't wait till the lightning's on top of us and then think, oh, we need to go. For example, our football stadium holds, as I said, 50,000 people. Well, it takes a considerable amount of time to move 50,000 people out of the stands, through the turnstiles, into a safe place. So an emergency action plan would have, where do people go? How long does it take them to get there? And then how long you stay there, and what to do if lightning does strike you. So there's a bunch of different things that an emergency action plan can cover.
So give me some of the things that they can actually cover.
Well, for lightning, any place, you look around. There's probably, if you're watching, your children play baseball, t-ball, there's probably a bathroom there somewhere that is not a porta potty, but a substantial bathroom that people could go in an emergency. We have 30,000 students. Football holds 50,000, as I mentioned. And we did have a lightning delay several years ago. Well, to get 50,000 people out of the stands takes a while. So if you want people in a safe place by the time the lightning is, say, 8 miles away, you've got to then figure out how long is it going to take. How long is it going to take, the swarm of 8-year-olds playing t-ball to get somewhere? Probably a little longer than a group of adults playing. Not promise. But those kinds of things are emergency action plan, and you want to think ahead of time. Where is a good place for me to go? Where is it safe? How long is it going to take for us to get there? And I need to make sure that somebody in our group is paying attention to the weather, so that there is a person who's a weather watcher that is kind of paying attention. That's their job. And it doesn't mean they don't do anything else. It just means that's their task, so they can let other people know. Hey, I thought I just saw lightning. Let's look. There's thunder. Okay, everybody, now we all go. So that's part of an emergency action plan. The other piece would be staying in your safe structure for at least 30 minutes. And that's 30 minutes after you've heard the last thunder. So it's a long time. That way you know you're safe.
Are there peak times of the year or specific times of the day that we may experience lightning?
Yes, and sadly, it's the time that, kids are out of school, and it's usually April through September, and it's usually in the evening hours, so 4 or 5 o'clock till about 9, 10 o'clock at night. So if you're playing the, Little League or the soccer games or the lacrosse, and you're outdoors because the weather's good, sadly, that's the peak time for picnics, for reunions, for camping, Boy Scouts. Of those times, July has year after year after year been the month of the highest fatalities. And this year we've already had 21, which is a bit of a shock because we haven't had that many in this amount of time in the last 4 years. And I think Florida's already had 3. So it's not slowing down. And people are outside, roofing, gardening, just not paying attention to the weather and get caught.
This is very, very scary stuff. But let's take a break for a moment, and then we'll come back with Katie Walsh Flanagan, who's talking about all of the aspects of lightning. And boy, is this important for you to know. I'll be back in just a moment.
When visiting Delray Beach, cool off with a delicious treat with FY&I Frozen Yogurt and Ice Cream Shop. They're located on 9 Northeast 2nd Avenue, Pineapple Grove, Delray Beach, Florida. FY&I offers more than 20 flavors of ice cream, frozen yogurt, Italian gelato, sorbet, protein shakes, and more. They also cater birthday parties and for any special occasion. Enjoy these delicious treats in our breezy, kid-friendly cafe. That looks good. Can Mommy have a taste?
Mama.
Whoops! Can't make up your mind? Say the magic words, Susan sent me, and receive a free small cone of frozen ice cream or yogurt. Be sure to visit FY&I Frozen Yogurt and Ice Cream Shop in beautiful Delray Beach. They're open Monday through Thursday and on Sundays from 11:30 every morning to 11 p.m. at night, and every Friday and Saturday from 11:30 to 1 a.m. in the morning. For store hours, call 561-450-7402. That's 561-450-7402. This commercial is brought to you in conjunction with the Susan Brender Show and FY&I Frozen Yogurt and Ice Cream Shop. See you there.
Okay, so Katie, are there statistics that shed light on lightning safety?
Oh my gosh, yes, there are, but sadly they're not sanctioned. For example, if I were to walk to my mailbox right now and get struck dead by lightning, there's no national database that is a repository that holds everyone who got struck dead by lightning. If you are in hiking and camping and that sort of thing, people might find you and you have passed away, but it might be attributed to a heart attack because that's what happens when you're struck by lightning and die. Your heart stops. Or it might look like an assault because sometimes when lightning strikes somebody, their clothes actually blow off because they're sweating, it's hot, lightning hits them, and the sweat evaporates and rips your clothes. So they get attributed to be more of a assault victim rather than a death. And people don't necessarily go to the emergency department if they're struck and they survive. They're struck by lightning or they feel the effects of lightning and they think, well, that was weird, but I'm walking, I must be fine. So the data we have is a guess. It's the things that made big news that we are able to find. One of the main problems with lightning is if it strikes the ground, and let's say there's a soccer game going on, almost everybody affiliated around that field can feel the lightning because it ripples out like throwing a pebble in a pond. And that kills like 50% of the people who die from that, not lightning striking out of the sky and hitting them directly, but hitting the ground and traveling along the ground to where people are.
Wow. It seems, though, that a lot of people survive lightning strikes. Are there any long-term issues with survivors?
Yes, and funny how we talked about concussion early on because the long-term problems are almost like a post-concussion where they look normal, they act normal, everything about them is normal, but in their head they have headaches, they have problems sleeping. A significant number of these people don't go back to their regular full-time job that they had before. Some are paralyzed. Some are blind. Some have significant emotional and physiological issues that carry on for the rest of their lives. So it is traumatic, especially since a lot of the time it's preventable. You know there's a storm coming. You've checked the weather. You hear the thunder. You see the lightning. And you've got to make sure that you get to a safe place. So you, especially if you have any listeners that are in charge of other people, scout leaders that are in charge of, campouts, if you have people in charge of camps or Little League or small children, those people need to really think about safety first and the game, the event, the fun times secondary.
Wow. That's really very, very interesting. Okay, let's sort of turn gears back to you being an athletic trainer. Is part of the training also diet? Tell us a little bit about what is happening now when you play a sport. You talked about exercise and the kinds of things, but not enough. Let's hear more about the kinds of things that people can do in order to get their body in great shape, and let's talk about the diet aspect of it too.
Certainly. It depends on the person. So let's talk to regular people as compared to an athlete, because an athlete has to fuel his or her food for what their event is. So if you are a cyclist and you're riding 100 miles, you need to have a lot of food and a lot of hydration and a lot of Gatorade, Powerade type thing to get you through that 100 miles. If you're playing football, you probably don't need Gatorade, only because you're doing bursts of activity, but you get lots of rest in between. So if you are a regular person and you go to the gym or you go on a walk or you run with your friends, unless you're doing something for 30 minutes to an hour and it's hot like it is in Florida and the South, you probably don't need Gatorade. You need to hydrate well, make sure you're getting plenty of good fluids, and make sure you're eating well when you're finished. People that skip breakfast because they're dieting, they're just really hurting themselves because they may look like they weigh less or think they do on scale, but they are losing strength. And so you want to make sure people have a good breakfast, people have lunch, people eat dinner. The people that skip meals or eat poorly in terms of high fat, high fried foods, not good. Personally, I want people to enjoy what they eat. So I've never told an athlete, a colleague, anyone to skip desserts. I think everything should be in moderation. So if you're going to have a big, giant, huge, cheesy pizza, maybe you don't want pepperoni. Maybe you get something a little more healthy. I might not have a huge thing of ice cream, but I want my ice cream. So I will get a small bowl, and I'll have a little bit of ice cream, and that's all I need. But it's balancing your nutrients, making sure you're getting the fluid you need. And just because you're going to run a few miles or go walk 5 miles in the afternoon or do some sort of golfing, physical tennis, doesn't mean you need to eat a lot more food. It's all in moderation.
Yes. And what are the 3 most important recommendations our listeners should know?
About lightning or about where would you like me to go with it?
About
I can
health.
go any direction. About health.
Yes.
The main thing about health, get enough sleep. Make sure you're hydrated, because people in the South repeatedly have shown they are not drinking enough fluids by day. Don't overdo it, but get enough sleep, get enough health, and just eat healthy. Nobody has to be told what healthy is. You know you're not supposed to have French fries. You should probably have a lot of greens. And it's not rocket science to not have a lot of gravy and fried stuff, but have fresh, good food. So sleep, good hydration, and good food. And, of course, it's understood that every day people move. They get up and they move. They don't just sit all day.
Yeah. Now, if people want to get in touch with you, or do you have a blog or anything that they can do to learn some of the things that you have to say?
I would love to chat with anyone who's interested. I can give you an email. With preseason football starting, going kind of crazy, I don't have time to write blogs. I read them, and I admire the people that have time to write them, but I don't. But I'd be happy to share with you my email if that would be okay.
That would be fine.
My last name is Flanagan. It's all A's. F as in Frank. Flanagan. 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 And then K for Katie. And it's at ECU, like East Carolina University, .edu. Flanagan K at ECU.edu.
My guest today has been Dr. Katie Walsh Flanagan, and she's a professor and director of athletic training at the Department of Education at East Carolina University. Thank you so very much for being on my show, Katie.
I really appreciate the opportunity to get the word out. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to The Susan Brender Show.